A second helping of my second review. Here's your look at the spectacular Spider-Man animated series Venom. High school hotshot Eddie Brock was the closest thing Peter Parker had to an older brother, until Peter's rejected symbiote costume took Brock as its new host. The alien gave him, the now corrupted Brock, all of Peter's spider powers and knowledge of his secret identity. Together they became Venom, the most feared adversary of the spectacular Spider-Man. As I go ahead and about to measure off Venom, something I didn't do back then, this was my second review on YouTube. Can you believe that? This was posted back in March 31st, 2009, so literally 10 years ago. Well, we're now into April. This was my second review that I had ever done, and still completely inexperienced as to really what I wanted to do with the channel. Some would even debate I'm still inexperienced, but I'm always growing, always learning. And one thing I certainly have learned is that you guys love to know how tall these figures stand. Something of which I've introduced to this channel because of you guys is the measurements of these figures. So using the Ultra Measure-Tron 5000, something of which I didn't even have back then, or to be fair, wasn't even invented back then, tells me that this Venom, the one that I did so many years ago, not this same one, is 5 inches in height. Doesn't seem very tall, does it? It's actually rather short and squatty. That switches over to centimeters, lickety-split, to be about 13 centimeters tall, 12.8 to be exact. And of course, because we did do the re-review of this guy not too long ago, this was my very first review, the Spectacular Spider-Man. Now to think how long ago I did these videos. 2009, this was also 2009, 10 years ago. What were you guys doing 10 years ago? Let me know down below in the comments section. It's nice to go back and kind of relive the experience, kind of just bring back my initial thought process when I was having a look at both of these figures. I had no idea really what I was doing back then. Again, some people would even say the same now. Go on with you. Go on. But as again, every single year that I'm doing YouTube, I like to hopefully think that I'm growing and evolving, finding things that work, getting rid of things that don't necessarily work. Case in point, looking at the packaging, which I know back in the day, I was really spending a considerable amount of time looking at the packaging. We're trying to streamline that, get that a little bit more efficient. So in the meantime, here are the two figures side by side. It's a bit of a disappointment, unfortunately, even back then. I mean, 10 years ago, I would have still been in the wherewithal to realize that Venom does look a little awkwardly stocky versus the Spectacular Spider-Man on the left. He really should have been a lot taller, and obviously the big problem, the big culprit to all of that is the fact that he's got these bent legs. One rather interesting thing to mention, I'll bring in the packaging once again for Venom. This is the original packaging that it would have come included with. Now, if you look at the back, though, none of these characters actually look like what they ended up looking like when they were released. This is, I guess, initial production prototype images. You can clearly see that doesn't look anything like, other than, I guess, body-wise and his arms. The head certainly, most definitely, does not look like Venom. Even if you look at any of the Spider-Mans that were circulating on the back of the packaging here, both the Spider-Mans and the Doc Ock never ended up looking like this when this initial line was released. Sort of the original prototypes. If anything, these look like more just regular Hasbro Spider-Man figures, and not specifically the Spectacular Spider-Man. But again, I just wanted to show this to you guys. So again, a little time capsule of packaging that would have existed back in the day if you were to find these on shelves. Resuming back to Venom, who certainly didn't want to overlook him. Now, this guy was actually released 3 different times. I reviewed all 3 different incarnations of Venom, which I actually believe the last Venom, if you guys wanted to go back, painfully suggesting that as an option. If you guys want to go back and watch my original videos of the Spectacular figures, I pretty much looked at all of them, including the 3 variations of Venom. It was pretty much like this colored Venom. There was one that had additional claws added to his arms, and then there was one that was a little bit more black in color. This one being the kind of the starting point for all of these. Yeah, the big problem to this particular figure is not necessarily the torso, nor is it the head, nor is it really the arms, it's the legs. Why the decision making ended up resolving on a matter of, well, the solution to this is to keep the figures small and keep them in the same sized packaging and price point. Let's give Venom permanently bent knees so the figure always is kind of in this squat, kind of I have to go to the bathroom pose. It's really just a shame, because if you look at this character in the show, he's tall, he's imposing, he's got a presence to him. He doesn't really feel so much that when you get him physically in hand. I have often tossed around the idea that if I was to get another one of these, which we're looking at right now because I've sold a lot of those older figures, Lone Panda tier, I would love to get another one of these and try to construct proper legs. They don't have to most definitely be posable, but I really liked what they did up here. Didn't really like what was going on down here. Having a look at his face, it is very accurate actually to the show. Kind of that elongated bottom jaw that sticks out from Venom's face. Both the sculpts and the coloring really on this guy is quite good. It's this weird sort of describing, sort of iridescent sort of coloring that's on the figure's suit, that if you look at it from certain angles, it looks like it's brighter at one time, and then you rotate it again, it looks like it's slightly darker again. Now, the thing is, though, it's not on all of the figure. If you look at, like, his underarms, for example, why not check out his underarms? You'll see that they didn't put anything there. Now, I don't know if intentionally they actually did that, or if, they just... I'm assuming it's probably from a cost savings standpoint. You can see that the airbrushing has sort of just stopped here. The rest of the arm left very, very barren and vacant. You could even really use the argument that this is a more closer coloring to what he has in the cartoon. Certainly not this metallic blue. I do feel certainly it is deliberate. Obviously it is deliberate because you can see a very sharp line cutting across the bicep and the forearm, indicating, yeah, we've just decided to stop this there. No, we don't need to add any more of that shiny blue paint. Now the paint, to my knowledge, to my recollection, for the long period of time that I had these figures before I sold them, weren't prone to flaking. I know one of the issues with these figures, some people had spoken the fact that they do have paint flaking. I don't have that problem just yet. This is obviously quite a new figure, just recently broken out of its plastic prison. You can kind of see where paint may have started to develop flaking, where the seam line is. I think this is where the biggest culprit is for some of this paint to start flaking off. So far, like I said, not so much the problem. He's got his big symbiote symbol located on the front, on the back, and certainly most definitely on the front. And some of the other notable traits on this Venom is the big squares on his hands and big giant claws for grabbing and manhandling the Spider-Man. He does have sort of weird looking feet, something of which again was rectified when we looked at the third version of Venom. I think it had just standard feet. Back in the day, though, I guess based on what they initially had thought Spectacular Spider-Man's Venom was going to look like, they also thought he was going to have these kind of V-shaped forked toes, something of which again didn't look like that in the series. Now, the thing about this is a gimmick figure. Most, all, if not all, the Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man figures had a gimmick to some extent, some of them a little bit more intrusive than others. Venom so happened to be claw slashing. Well, what does that exactly entail? Why are you winding this up, somebody asks. Well, if you wind it back and let it go, this is his claw slash. It's sort of hokey. It's about what you would expect for figures back in the 80s, for example, like the Superpowers figures that would have normally like a twist action or an arm swivel action that would spring back. Now, you could certainly do this until the cows come home. Obviously, if you guys wanted to be going other places and don't really want to sit back and watch one guy doing this for the next 15 minutes, hopefully this will just indicate to you guys what exactly the toy does. Now, you can also do it the opposite way as well. You certainly don't want to be exercising just one part of your body. You got to rotate it, you got to alternate that, and Venom does alternate it this way as well. It sort of does limit what then you can do with his posability. Now, he still has, for example, the head swivel. It rotates all the way around. You probably won't enjoy it for the fact that you're rotating the head as much as you are. That's going to cause one heck of a neck ache right there. You can rotate the head all the way around. The shoulders hinge outward, but the length of the arm, I just want to show you here, even if you bring the arms down, they're sort of in the way. Ultimately, it just causes the figure to look like he's dragging his arms like gorillas. Or the alternative to that is you can bring the arms all the way up, and it looks like he's getting excited for opening up Christmas presents. The arms also hinge outward. Again, it doesn't really help the figure too much because his footprint is so small, despite for the fact it does look like he's got like a wide stance. If you bring his arms up, you sort of have to compensate for it by bringing the arms, for the legs, I should say, further back. And it sort of does aid. I guess it does help for the fact that he does have the V-shaped feet. If he had his regular superhero or regular human feet, this would be probably a little bit more trickier to accomplish. Then as for the legs only swivel forward and they swivel back. They don't hinge out or anything like that. Personally speaking, I picked up this figure a second go around because A, I missed the figure. Despite its shortcomings literally for his lower half, despite its shortcomings, I always really liked this Venom. I really was sad, legitimately sad, that I parted ways with him as well as the Spectacular Spider-Man. We'll just pick up Spectacular Spider-Man, which I just happen to have over on the side here. I do really regret selling a lot of these figures. At the time, of course, much like every other collector, you come to that point in your life where you think, maybe I don't want said item, said figure. This toad of figures, for example, imaginary pointing to a virtual toad. I don't really need these anymore, so I'm going to simply sell them. I did that with a lot of the Spectacular Spider-Man figures. In fact, I did it with all of the Spectacular Spider-Man figures, and I also did it with all the Batman figures. The Batman figures. Some of which were some of my earliest reviews on this channel. For being just simply sentimental, I kind of wish I could have kept some of those older figures. Not even for the fact that I missed those figures having on the shelf, but for the fact that they represent sort of a time capsule for what I was doing when I first started reviewing on YouTube. So many years ago, 10 years ago now, these were again my first two reviews. Spectacular Spider-Man, which we've just recently revisited, and now the Claw/Venom. Now, as I said, there was 3 different variations to Venom here, 3 different color options and different accessory options that were available for this super villain. Ultimately, of course, when it came to sourcing him out again, I wanted to find the same one that I reviewed in my second ever video. It ultimately caused me to pick up the first edition of Venom, and not really the third edition, which I really would have preferred if I wanted to have a figure back in my collection. I really did like that Venom the most because even though he is a little squat and his knees are permanently bent, at least the third Venom had the closest color scheme to the colors that he has in the actual cartoon. Truth be told, though, unfortunately with a lot of these figures, if you ever have buyer's regret and you want to go back and source out these figures again, that's where you have the harsh reality of realizing that a lot of these toys that you grew up with and then parted ways with, probably for next to nothing, are asking a pretty penny nowadays on eBay. I think, in fact, even to get the first edition Venom, the one that we had looked at in this review, if you could believe it, cost me about $50. Ouch! Needless to say, though, I felt nostalgic for the fact I wanted to go back and at the very least look at my first 2 reviews ever on this channel. It shows a bit of a time capsule again as to how much I've grown as a reviewer, at least from my own perspective, and hopefully you guys can see some growth since the initial review of this guy 10 years ago. One thing I will say, though, to anybody that's considering selling their collection off to either free up space or to get some extra cash, extra money to play around with, really give it some serious thought. I've realized over the years of giving away and selling off a lot of my collection that I've had buyer's remorse for some of the things that I had held dear at one point and then just simply thought that I didn't need it anymore. To go online to get these things now are asking, like I said, a pretty penny. Even things like the DC Universe figures, which I really wanted to always kind of go back and finish off some of the collection that I never got around to reviewing the first go around. I realized very quickly the prices that those things are going for, because there's people out there, the sellers out there know exactly that there's going to be buyers that are willing to pay that price to pick up things that they maybe didn't get the first time around, or, like me, had them in their collection at one point, sold them, regretted it later, and come crawling back to try to find them again. So if you guys are ever interested in selling off your collection, do listen to this humbled reviewer's opinion. 10 years after reviewing this guy, do give it some thought before you part ways with it. You may realize that maybe keeping it in your collection, you may not regret it so much later on in life. Just FYI. Today, though, we were having a look at my second review of all time. I think this was first posted on YouTube back on March 31st, 2009. I really did want to do this on March 31st, in the same way that I did the Spectacular Spider-Man the very day that I did the review of it. But I sort of got sidetracked with life, as it usually is, and it just ultimately caused the figure to get re-reviewed in mid-April, or late April, or maybe it's going to be September by the time I actually post this video. Let's hope it's not that late. I do procrastinate from time to time. If you guys haven't had a chance yet to subscribe to this channel, certainly do yourself a favor and hit that little subscribe button down below. Periodically, I'm not making any promises, but periodically I may go back and kind of make the decision that I want to pick up some of these older figures, or I might even still have them in my collection, and I might want to try to do re-reviews of some of these. I like to kind of go back and give a new perspective that I maybe didn't initially have when I had looked at these videos, these figures before. But make sure you hit that little subscribe button down below. Also, you know what, as a question posed to you guys, the viewers, let me know down below when you subscribed to this channel. For the duration of time that this channel has existed on YouTube, 10 years in fact, and growing, I always like to know when you guys subscribed, when you found this channel, and what caused you to find this channel. Like, was there a specific thing that you were looking for? Was there a specific figure review that you were looking for and you just happened to stumble onto my channel? I always like to hear from people how they found this channel. More videos will be coming your way. So again, as always, guys, thanks for watching. It really does mean a lot. And I'll see you guys next time.